Traveling, they say, broadens the mind. And when we Americans travel in Europe, we wonder, how did mosques and Ottoman-built bridges like this get into Southeast Europe, like here in Bosnia? And while we certainly think that Prague is beautiful, many Czechs will tell you that all this glorious Baroque architecture was built by the Austrians, not the Czechs. And when you visit Warsaw, Poles will tell you that hideous buildings like this are Soviet, not theirs. So this short trip through Europe's maps is meant to explain just a little about how borders moved and how cultures moved with them. This is how Europe looked after the Treaty of Vienna in 1815. There were three big empires: the Austrian Empire, ruled by the Habsburgs; the Ottoman or Turkish Empire, ruled by its sultans; and the Russian Empire, ruled by the Romanovs. Germany, there wasn't a country called Germany yet. Prussia was the dominant state. Poland, from the 1790s until 1918, there was no country called Poland. It had been carved up by the Russians, the Prussians, and the Austrians. By the beginning of the 20th century, the Ottoman Empire had been greatly reduced, and these four countries came into existence: Romania, Bulgaria, Serbia, Montenegro. And since 1867, the weakened Austrian Empire had become the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Beginning in 1871, Germany was united under Chancellor von Bismarck and ruled by Kaiser Wilhelm I and his successors. Here is the Austrian Archduke Franz Ferdinand in Sarajevo in June 1914. A few minutes after this picture was taken, he and his wife were assassinated. This was the event that touched off the First World War. Some called it the Great War. Millions died, and when the smoke cleared in 1918, all the great empires of Europe had vanished. At the Treaty of Versailles in 1919, the victorious Allies had redrawn the map of Central Europe. Russia became the Soviet Union, led first by Lenin, then Stalin. Germany became a democracy, but the Weimar Republic was hated by the country's extreme right as well as the extreme left. And Germany's first democracy was born in a time of economic upheaval, social instability, and political assassinations. Poland was reborn for the first time since the 1790s. A new country, Czechoslovakia, was carved out of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and it proved to be the only stable democracy in Central Europe. Both Austria and Hungary were dismembered and greatly reduced in size. Romania, which had been on the Allied side in the First World War, was greatly enlarged. And in the Western Balkans, a new country was formed, Yugoslavia. It seemed that no one in Europe was satisfied with the Treaty of Versailles. Many said it would only be a matter of time before war came again. The Great Depression that began in America in 1929 quickly made its way to Europe. In Germany, the extreme right-wing party, the National Socialists, under Adolf Hitler, took power in 1933. Austria became a dictatorship in the same year as Germany, and Italy preceded them both with Mussolini. Adolf Hitler insisted on changing the map of Europe his way. He marched into Austria in 1938, then demanded a portion of Czechoslovakia, and the British and the French governments agreed to give it to him at the Treaty of Munich in 1938. The British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain said, "We would have peace in our time." But then German forces invaded Poland in 1939, setting off the Second World War, a war that killed tens of millions of people. Cities were destroyed, and the vast majority of Europe's Jewish population was slaughtered. While American troops liberated Western Europe in 1944 and 1945, the Soviet Union occupied Romania, Bulgaria, Hungary, Poland, the Baltics, most of Czechoslovakia, and a part of Germany. Wherever the Red Army went, they left communism behind. In 1946, Winston Churchill said, "An iron curtain had been drawn across Europe, dividing East and West. A new war, the Cold War, had begun, and it would last for 4 decades. The symbol of the Cold War was here in Berlin. An ugly wall was built in 1961 between communist East Berlin and West Berlin, and West Berlin was then called the island in the Red Sea." But in 1989, communism collapsed in Central Europe, and 2 years later, in 1991, it collapsed in the Soviet Union as well. The Czechs and Slovaks went their separate ways peacefully in 1993. But Yugoslavia descended into a series of wars which lasted from 1991 until 1999. As you've seen in this film, Europe's maps have never really stopped changing, and Europe's history, as we see, is still being written.